Hello everybody. Today we'll start a very important system of your body, the cardiovascular system. First, we'll see the structures of the cardiovascular system. Uh, the name is cardiovascular system. The word cardio refers to the heart, and vascular refers to the blood vessels. Okay. So the heart and the blood vessels together form the cardiovascular system. Now blood vessels include, that arteries, veins, and the capillaries. Okay. So a heart and many arteries, many veins, and many capillaries throughout the body. And inside the blood vessels, you have what? You have the blood. Blood circulates inside the blood vessels. So these are the parts of the cardiovascular system. Okay. So the main organ is the heart. So first we'll talk about the heart. We'll see the location of the heart. Then we'll talk about different types of circulation of blood. Then we'll talk about the coverings of the heart, surface of the heart, wall of the heart. Then we'll talk about the anatomy of the heart muscle. Then the coronary circulation is the heart's own circulation. You know that heart distributes blood throughout the body by its pumping action, right? So heart pumps the blood and blood circulates throughout the body. However, heart needs its own circulation to supply blood to the wall of the heart or the muscle of the heart, and that circulation is called the coronary circulation. We'll talk about inside the heart, the chambers, valves, those structures. So first, the location of the heart. Heart is located mostly in the left side of the thorax. So located in the mostly in the left side. You see here, this is the heart, and two-third part of the heart, about two-third, if this is the midline, right? So two-third part is located in the left side, and one-third part is located in the right side of the thorax. Now, your heart is a cone-shaped organ. Cone-shaped or conical organ, two-third part in the left side and one-third part is in the right side of the thorax. Okay, and the size of the heart is like the size of your fist. Okay, and now if you see the upper and lower border of the heart, this is the first rib and this is the sixth rib here, this one, and this the area between second and third ribs, this is called second intercostal space. This is first intercostal. Intercostal means in between the ribs. So this is first intercostal space, this is second intercostal space. Okay, upper boundary is in the second intercostal space. These are blood vessels. Okay, so heart upper boundary is here and lower boundary is here in the fifth intercostal space. So the heart is located between the second and fifth intercostal spaces, that is the upper and lower boundaries. Now your heart is sitting on the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm, and if you see the left lower corner of the heart, it is pointed and this is called the apex of the heart. Okay, and in the back of the heart is called the base. Okay, so this lower left pointed area is called the apex, and this is the diaphragm. So heart rests on the diaphragm and it is actually strongly attached to the diaphragm by fibrous tissue. Fibrous tissue attaches the heart to the diaphragm strongly. Now, in both sides of your heart, you have the lungs. So, you have two lungs, you know that, right and left. So, you see here, this is the left lung, this is the right lung, and your heart is sitting between the two lungs. Okay. Now, this is the apex, the pointed lower left. Okay. This is the diaphragm, this one. Okay. And this space between the two lungs is called the mediastinum. So this whole area between the two lungs is called mediastinum. So let me draw here. This is your left lung. Okay. This is your right lung, and this is your left lung, and this area is called the mediastinum. So the area between two lungs, and here is the diaphragm. So your lungs are also sitting on the diaphragm and the heart is here. This is the heart. Okay, and you see here one thing, that your heart is located in the lower half of the mediastinum, right, in the lower part of the mediastinum, and the large blood vessels, those are bringing blood in or taking the blood out from the heart, are in the upper part of the mediastinum. Okay, so this is the upper mediastinum, and this is the lower mediastinum. So we can say that heart is in the lower mediastinum and large blood vessels are in the upper mediastinum. Now you see here, these are the large blood vessels and this is the heart. Okay. Circulation of blood. We divide the blood circulation into two types: adult circulation and fetal circulation. So in the adult human body, the circulation is called the adult circulation, and adult circulation includes three types of circulation. One is called the pulmonary circulation, another is called the systemic circulation, and there is a special circulation that is called the portal circulation, also called hepatic portal circulation. Okay. And the circulation between the fetus inside the uterus and the mother's body is called fetal circulation. So this is between the mother and fetus. Okay, so this is only in the fetus. Now pulmonary circulation is the circulation between the heart and the lungs. Heart and two lungs. The blood circulation between these two, the heart and two lungs, that is the pulmonary circulation. Systemic circulation is the circulation between the heart and the whole body. Okay. And portal circulation or hepatic portal circulation is between the GI tract, that means your stomach, intestine, GI tract, and the liver. So what happens? The blood takes the nutrients from the GI tract, and first blood goes to the liver, where the processing of the nutrients first take place. So liver is the organ where the nutrients are taken from the GI tract first for the processing of the nutrients. Okay, so those are different types of circulations present in the human body. Okay, now if I ask you, tell me few differences between the pulmonary and systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. So you already know that pulmonary circulation is between the heart and two lungs. So heart and lungs. Systemic is between the heart and the body. Now, since pulmonary circulation is between the heart and two lungs, you know that your lungs are located just beside the heart. So, that circuit of blood circulation is short circuit. Blood goes to the lungs and comes back to the heart. So between the heart and the lungs. So distance is short. In case of systemic, since the blood goes throughout the body from the heart, so it's a long distance. Blood circulates, right? So that is a long circuit. Okay, circulation. So pulmonary is short circuit circulation, systemic is long circuit circulation. Pulmonary, since heart sends the blood to the lungs and lungs are located just beside the heart, so the pressure is much lower. Less pressure can send the blood from the heart to the lung. So low pressure in pulmonary circulation. It is a low pressure system. In case of systemic, since the blood is sent throughout the body, the heart needs to pump the blood more forcefully. So this is a high pressure system. Okay, and now if you see, this is the heart, and heart has how many chambers? Human heart has 4 chambers. Okay, like this. So this is the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. So atria, plural, atrium is singular. So right and left, 2 atria are the upper chambers. Upper chambers. And ventricles are lower. Okay. Now remember, when you study the pulmonary and systemic circulation, if you keep couple of things in your memory, it will be very easy for you to explain or understand the pulmonary and systemic circulation. Okay. First, you need to remember that right side of your heart, this side, right side contains deoxygenated. That means what? Carbon dioxide, more carbon dioxide, less oxygen. Okay. So right side contains deoxygenated blood, and left side of your heart contains oxygenated blood, oxygen rich blood. Okay, oxygenated. Okay, so that is one thing you need to remember. Right side means right atrium and right ventricle deoxygenated, and left atrium, left ventricle oxygenated. Now, if I ask you why blood goes from the heart to the lungs, you all know that blood goes from the heart to the lungs to get the oxygen, right? And another thing you need to remember that uh, atria receive blood from outside and then give it to same sides ventricle. So that is the function of the atrium or atria. Receive atria, both right and left, receive blood from the outside of the heart and give the blood to the same sides ventricles. Okay, so that means what? Blood arrives into the atria, right and left, from outside. So this is the direction of the blood, and then from atria the blood goes to the same sides ventricle. Left atrium gives blood to the left ventricle, right atrium gives blood to the right ventricle. Okay, so that is what here. And then you need to remember ventricles do what? Ventricles send the blood or pump the blood to outside of the heart, to the outside of the heart. So you need to remember three things. Right side contains deoxygenated blood, less oxygen, more carbon dioxide, and left side contains oxygen rich or oxygenated blood. So that is one thing you need to remember. Atria receive the blood from outside and give the blood to the same sides ventricle. And last thing you need to remember, ventricles pump the blood to the outside of the heart, outside of the heart. So if you remember these three things, then everything will be very clear. Okay, now let's go back. Why heart sends blood to the lungs? Because blood goes to the lungs to get oxygen. Blood gets oxygen from the lungs. So now you tell me which side or which ventricle should send the blood to the lungs? Right ventricle, because right side contains deoxygenated blood, right? So that deoxygenated blood should be sent to the lungs. So the right ventricle sends blood to the lungs. Right and left lungs, okay? And then blood gets oxygen. So you see here now, this is the right ventricle here. So right ventricle sends blood, deoxygenated blood shown by blue color here, deoxygenated blood is sent to the lungs, where blood gets oxygen and becomes oxygenated. You see here red, blood got oxygen, and that oxygenated blood now from the lung should return to the heart. Now, since the blood is oxygenated, it should return in the left side, because left side contains oxygenated blood, right? So from right and left lungs, oxygenated blood will arrive into the left atrium here. Okay. Then I told you atrium always sends blood to same side's ventricle. So left atrium now has oxygenated blood, and that oxygenated blood will go to the left ventricle. Now you all know that heart should send oxygenated blood to where? To the body, because body needs oxygen, right? So the left ventricle will pump the blood to the body, oxygenated blood to the body. Okay. Then after the blood circulates in the body, blood gives oxygen to the body and gets carbon dioxide, so blood becomes deoxygenated. Now you see here blood, oxygenated blood is circulating to the body and in the body, and the oxygen is given to the tissue, and blood receives carbon dioxide from the tissue and become deoxygenated here. And deoxygenated blood from the upper part and lower part of the body returns in which side? Right side, because right side is for deoxygenated. So from upper part, superior vena cava, large vein, lower part inferior vena cava, they bring deoxygenated blood. And who receives the blood from outside? Atrium. So this is the right atrium, receives deoxygenated blood, and atrium always gives blood to the same side's ventricle. So now you see right ventricle has deoxygenated blood. So that deoxygenated blood should go again to the lungs, right and left lungs, to get the oxygen, and then returns in the left side. So that is the entire circulation, okay, systemic and pulmonary. Covering of the heart is called the pericardium. So this is the heart again, and heart has a double layered serous membrane. Double layered serous membrane, and that is the covering of the heart called the pericardium. Okay, so let's see. The inner layer is called the visceral pericardium or visceral layer of the pericardium, which is attached to the wall of the heart and then turns here, folds here like this, and forms the outer layer. So it is actually a single structure, gets folded here to form the outer layer. So the layer attached to the wall of the heart, surface of the heart, the inner one, that is the visceral layer of pericardium, and the outer one is called the parietal layer. Okay, it is like a balloon. If you push your fist against the balloon, what happens? Your fist is the heart, and around your fist you have two membranes or layers. One is attached to the hand, then you have the air, and the outer one is next. So it is like that. So those are two layers, and in between these two layers you have a fluid, so partially filled with fluid, not tightly. Small amount of fluid is there, and that fluid is called the pericardial fluid, and this fluid is a lubricating slippery fluid. When your heart contracts and relaxes, gets smaller and larger, bigger, the layers, these two layers, move in opposite direction. However, because of that fluid, lubricating fluid, uh, friction or rubbing between those two layers is prevented. Okay, so the pericardial fluid reduces the friction between two layers when the heart moves. Now, if inflammation occurs in the pericardium, that is called pericarditis. Pericarditis. Itis is inflammation of the pericardium. Okay. In that case, the friction occurs between two layers, and pain. You feel pain because of that friction. Okay. And the person might have fever and other breathing difficulty and other disorders. So that is pericarditis. Now, if you see the wall of the heart has four chambers, you know that. So this is the wall of the heart, and the wall uh, is thin in the atrium and thick in the ventricles. So if you see the wall of the atrium, atrial wall is thin, thinner than the ventricle. Ventricular wall is thick. Why? You just think that atria receive the blood, right, and sends the blood to the same side's ventricle. So this is the atrium. It receives the blood from outside and sends to the same side's ventricle. Same thing here, receives the blood, sends to the same side's ventricle. So atria don't need to pump strongly to send blood from here to here, because ventricles are just under the atria, right? So gravitational force, and it is just next to just below the atrium. So that's why atria don't need to contract strongly. That's why the wall is thin. However, you know that ventricles pump the blood to the outside. So the ventricular wall must be stronger or thicker. Now, if we compare the right and left ventricle, you know that right ventricle sends the blood to the lungs. However, left ventricle sends the blood to the body. So this one needs to pump more forcefully than this one. So that's why left ventricular wall is thicker than the right ventricular wall. If you compare two walls, right ventricular wall and left ventricular wall is much thicker than the right, because left ventricle very strongly pumps the blood to send to the body. Now, inside the heart, you have four chambers. We talked about that, and we already talked about the functions of those chambers. Now, there are four sets of valves inside the heart. Uh, Two sets are AV valves or atrioventricular valves, and other two sets are called semilunar valves. Okay, so those are the valves inside the heart. Atrioventricular, that means between the atrium and ventricle. And semilunar valve, one is called aortic semilunar at the beginning of the aorta, and another is called pulmonary semilunar. Why? Because this one is at the beginning of the pulmonary trunk. So this is at the beginning of the aorta, large artery, and this is at the beginning of the pulmonary trunk. This aortic valves open when the left ventricle contracts, blood goes to the body through the aorta, and pulmonary semilunar valves open when the right ventricle contracts to send the blood, pulmonary means lung, to the lungs. Okay. Heart has two types of blood vessels. Why two types? You know that some blood vessels, those are large blood vessels to take the blood out from the heart or bring the blood inside the heart. So these are large blood vessels to take the blood out from the heart or bring the blood in. So those are large vessels attached to the heart, right? To do what? Take blood out or bring the blood into the heart. Now, small blood vessels are present in the wall of the heart. Those are not to take the blood out or in from the heart, those are to supply blood, oxygen and nutrition to the heart muscle. Okay, and the arteries that supply blood to the heart muscle, these arteries are coronary, circulation or coronary arteries. Okay. And one more thing, inside the heart you have a few structures. Those are made of highly specialized tissue. So highly specialized tissue structures are present inside the heart, and those are called conductive system or conductive tissue. Conductive tissue of the heart. Okay, we'll talk about this. So you have learned the covering of the heart, the wall of the heart, thickness of the wall of the heart, and why uh, um, it is thin in the atrium and thick in the ventricle, while left ventricle wall is thicker than the right ventricle. You already know 4 chambers of the heart. Uh, we talked about the valves inside the heart. We talked about the blood vessels, large and small, and special conductive tissue. So we already talked about the covering. Here you see this is the outer layer, parietal pericardium, and this is the inner one attached to the wall of the heart, and that is the visceral pericardium. And this is the cavity contains the lubricating fluid. Okay, this is the strong fibrous attachment, fibrous tissue that I mentioned, uh, attaches the heart to the diaphragm. Now, one more thing here, it's a clinical um, condition. If inflammation occurs, I have already explained that in the pericardium, then swelling occurs, right, in the pericardium, and that causes the friction between two layers, and that is pericarditis. Now, another condition in which excess fluid accumulates in the space here between two layers. So you can think that if too much fluid accumulates around the heart, what happens? The pressure around the heart increases, right? So the pressure around the heart increases. If excess fluid accumulates in this space, and the heart will not be able to expand, and that condition is called tamponade. So increased pressure around the heart due to increased amount of fluid okay, around the heart. External of the heart, if you see the heart from outside, you will see you can tell where the atria and where the ventricles. We know that by pressing the wall from outside you can tell, because we know that atrial wall is much thinner than the ventricular wall, so you can feel that. And upper chambers are atria and lower chambers are ventricular wall is thick, so if you press you can tell. uh, and the atria and ventricles are separated by a groove or sulcus that is called the coronary sulcus. So coronary sulcus is between the atria and the ventricles. Let me draw here. So this is the heart again. So coronary sulcus more prominent in the back. If you see the back of the heart, uh, you have the atria, right? This is right, left atria, right atrium, and ventricles, left ventricle, right ventricle. Okay, so there is a groove between atria and ventricles, and this is called the coronary sulcus. Sulcus is groove, and in the back part of the heart, in the coronary sulcus, you have a important vein inside that sulcus that is called coronary sinus. It is a short, wide vein located in the coronary sulcus in the back of the heart. It is a short but wide vein. Then between two ventricles you have another sulcus or groove on the surface of the heart. This is called interventricular. Makes sense? Between two ventricles, interventricular sulcus. There are two. One is in the front of the heart. This is, if this is the front, you will see here. So that is called the anterior, and another is in the back between two ventricles. That is the posterior interventricular sulcus. Okay, and we'll see that in next picture. See anterior interventricular, posterior interventricular between two ventricles. Here, this is the anterior surface of the heart. So you see here, this is atria, right atrium, left atrium is the back, you don't see here, and this is the right ventricle. So you see between atrium and ventricle, here is the coronary sulcus. It goes to the back too, and so it separates atrium and ventricle. And this is, here you have interventricular sulcus. This is front, so anterior interventricular. This is left ventricle, and this is right ventricle. So this is interventricular sulcus here. Now you see in the sulci you have fat, arteries, veins. So blood vessels and fats accumulate there. Okay. We have already talked about the chambers of the heart and their functions. We have already talked about the valves. Let's quickly go over again. Two sets of AV valve or atrioventricular valve. Okay, this is the right side, so right AV valves you see here, and this is the left side, left AV valve. Left AV valve is also called mitral valve. Okay, you probably have heard this term mitral valve, which is actually left AV valve. Okay, or left atrioventricular valve. And mitral or left AV valve is a bicuspid. That means uh, it has two leaf-like structures. So that's why it is called a bicuspid valve. Okay, cusp, leaf-like structure. So this is the left AV valve. Okay, bicuspid. And here, left is bicuspid or mitral. Right AV valve has three leaf-like structures, so that is called tricuspid. So this is tricuspid right AV valve. Okay. Now AV valves always open downwards. Why? You already know that atrium sends the ventricle blood to the same side's ventricle. So from the atrium, blood goes to the ventricle, right? So the door must open downwards. Now when the ventricle contracts, this goes up, so the blood will not go back to the atrium. It will only go to the outside. We know that from the ventricle, blood goes to the outside of the body, right? So the valves will close this opening. So, and at the root of the pulmonary trunk, this is the pulmonary trunk. At the beginning of the pulmonary trunk, here you have the pulmonary semilunar valve, and at the beginning of the aorta, this is the aorta, you don't see here, you have aortic semilunar valve. Okay, it's not clear here. So those are semilunar valves, and semilunar valves only move upwards because blood gets out, right? So when the blood gets out, they will open upwards, but blood cannot get back. If it tries to get back, the valves will get closed. Okay, so valves, all these valves are unidirectional. They open towards the direction of the blood. Open uh, towards the blood flow. Okay. Now, one more thing about the valve. The valves do what? Regulate the blood flow. Okay. Regulate the blood flow. And the sound you hear through stethoscope, that sound is actually comes from the closure of the valves, not the opening. When the valves close, you hear the sound, lub dub. Closure of the valves produce that lub dub sound. Okay, the sound is produced during the closure of the valve. So the valves regulate the amount of blood flow as well as the direction of blood flow. Direction of flow. So these two things are controlled by the valves, regulating the blood flow and regulating the direction of the blood flow. And the sound you hear lub dub due to the closure of the valves. Now, there is a clinical condition that is called valvular stenosis. Stenosis. And valvular stenosis is a condition in which the valves get narrow and stiff. So the valves get what? Narrow and stiff. Stiffness. Hard. Hardening. Normally the valves are highly flexible. They move a lot, right? So more they move, they can open the door more wide, right? But in valvular stenosis, since they get stiff and narrow and hard, what happens? Their movement is much less than a healthy valve, and the valve will partially open, not completely open the door. So the blood, the amount of blood will flow less from one chamber to another. So that is a condition, it is a clinical condition, right? Um, Defective valve, and that is called valvular stenosis. Now, in that condition, you know that you can change the valve. Uh, this should be a valvular stenosis. Uh, so that is a condition, clinical condition of the valves. Now, when you see here, this is what happens in valvular stenosis. This is the heart, right? So this is your right AV valve, left AV valve. So in normal condition, they open when the blood goes from the atrium to the ventricle. From here to here, they can open a lot, so the blood can quickly move from the atrium to the ventricle. But in stenosis, they don't move much, so remain mostly closed. So a small amount of blood will go from atrium to ventricle, but the pressure will be there because the blood will try to, you know, uh, leave the chamber. So since the passage is narrower, so the blood will keep, pushing the valves, and that will produce a long sound, prolonged, sound of friction, and that is called murmur, a clinical condition, murmur. So sound which you can actually listen by stethoscope. Here you see two uh, semilunar valves. These are semilunar valves, aortic and pulmonary, and this is tricuspid. You see 1, 2, 3. So this is right AV, this is bicuspid or mitral left AV valve. Here in real cross section of the heart, you can see all those four valves. Inside the ventricle, this is a picture taken from inside the ventricle. This is a real picture from inside the ventricle, and in the ventricular wall you will see the muscles attached. Those are called papillary muscles, and from the papillary muscles uh, thin cord-like structures or string-like structures arise and go to the AV valves. So AV valve is here. So these strings are called chordae tendineae, chordae tendineae, okay, to regulate the movement of the valve. So from the wall, these muscles arise. These are papillary muscles, okay, and then from the muscles, the strings or thin cord-like structures. These are chordae tendineae. Now, if you see the wall of the heart, it has three layers. Outermost layer is the epicardium, which is actually visceral pericardium. You must remember the very beginning today I showed you the covering of the heart, and the inner layer of it, pericardium, is called the visceral pericardium, right? So this is the visceral pericardium, and that is the outermost layer, also called epicardium. Then the middle layer is thick muscular layer. In the ventricle, the muscular layer is thicker. So this is the middle layer, thick middle layer, which is muscular layer, called the myocardium. And then in the inner surface of the cavity, inner surface of the wall, that means around the cavity, you have a thin simple squamous layer that is called endocardium. Endo means inside, right? So epicardium is actually visceral pericardium, visceral layer of pericardium. Then middle muscle layer, cardiac muscle, okay, and inner endocardium, simple squamous. That means a single layer of flat cells. Now, myocardium infection can cause inflammation of the muscle of the heart or myocardium, that is called myocarditis. Makes sense? Itis. So that will cause pain in the wall of the heart. Epicardium is the outer layer, and endocardium. If inflammation occurs in the endocardium, that is called endocarditis. Endocarditis. Okay. So here you see again, this is the muscular, thick muscular middle layer, myocardium. This is simply squamous, that is the endocardium, and this is the visceral pericardium, that means epicardium. Okay. If you see the anatomy of the cardiac muscle, you already know that cardiac muscle tissue, if you see under the microscope, has striations, branching. We talked about that before, and large number of mitochondria um, are present in the myocardium or heart muscle. About 25 to 35% of the cell volume is given by the mitochondria. Why you need huge number of mitochondria in the cardiac muscle? Because you know that cardiac muscle is working 24 hours. Even when you are sleeping, your heart is continuously working, right? And to work continuously, you need more ATP. And you know that mitochondria is the powerhouse. Most of the ATPs are produced in the mitochondria, right? So that's why you have many mitochondria, ATP. You need continuous supply of ATP. Uh, Usually a single nucleus, sometimes two, but not more than that. Intercalated discs, you already know that thick bands, and in the intercalated disc you have two types of junctions. So let me draw here. This is the cylindrical shaped heart muscle, and these are striations, you know that, you have seen that before, and a thick band that connects the fibers. So this is another heart muscle fiber, nucleus, striations. Okay, so this is the intercalated disc. Now in the intercalated disc you have two types of junctions, desmosome, we talked about this before in NP1, and gap junctions. And you must remember that desmosomes work like the zipper in your cloth, so very strongly hold the fibers together. However, the gap junctions have channels through passes. So what happens because of gap junctions? The ions can quickly move from one fiber to another. So the heart muscle fibers can quickly talk to each other. So desmosomes hold them strongly together. They will not get separated, and gap junctions help them to talk to each other by exchanging the ions. And because of these two, the heart muscle fibers are strongly connected to each other, chemically as well as physically, and they work together like an unit, and that is called syncytium. So syncytium is an unit working together. Because of those two types of junctions, all heart muscle fibers can work together, exchange quickly information between them, and strongly attached to each other. You see plenty of mitochondria inside the fiber, and around the muscle fiber you have sarcoplasmic reticulum. Just know that sarcoplasmic reticulum is filled with calcium. Coronary circulation is the circulation of blood uh, in the wall of the heart, and coronary circulation has two important properties. So this is your coronary artery. There are two. Okay, this is another artery in the wall of the heart, and these arteries have two important characteristics or properties. They have many collaterals, that means branches, lateral branches. So these are collateral branches. So this is one property, many collaterals branches, collateral branches. And another thing, that these collaterals form more branches, and these branches get attached to each other like this. So this one, another one, and they form anastomosis. What is that? They get connected to each other like this. So anastomosis. Ses is plural, cis is singular. Okay. If I indicate only one, anastomosis. If since there are many, say anastomosis. So these are two important properties, if I ask you, of the coronary circulation in the wall of the heart. The advantage of the coronary circulation, anastomosis and collateral is that, just think that if you get a blockage here, the artery got blocked here, okay, so blood will not pass through it. However, because of these collaterals and anastomosis, what will happen? The blood will find a different route, will go here, this way or this way, okay, so secure the blood flow to the tissue. Just you need to remember the arteries in the wall of the heart and veins. The arteries of coronary circulation, right and left coronary arteries, these are two big ones, and then they give a number of branches: marginal artery, circumflex artery, interventricular arteries. Right and left coronary arteries come from ascending aorta. They are direct branch from the ascending aorta, then enter into the wall of the heart. The veins are small cardiac, anterior cardiac, great cardiac, middle cardiac. You can write it down: middle cardiac, vein, and short wide one in the back is the coronary sinus. I mentioned about this before. So these are the main veins in the wall of the heart. You see here, this is the right coronary artery, this is the left coronary artery here, and this is the circumflex. Circumflex means circling around. So it goes to the back and comes back like this, circular. And this is the interventricular, in the interventricular sulcus. Okay, marginal. So these are important arteries, and you see anastomosis here. These are collaterals. The veins, this is the coronary sinus in the back, short, wide vein. And you see great cardiac, anterior cardiac, middle cardiac, small cardiac. Okay, the clinical condition, angina pectoris. If the artery that supplies blood to the wall of the heart is partially blocked or gets narrow, then what will happen? Less blood will come to this tissue, heart tissue. So less blood will flow because of the partial blockage or narrowing of the artery. And because of lack of oxygen, what will happen? Pain will be created in the muscle. And angina means pain, and pectoris means chest. So that is the chest pain. Pectoral, pectoral area, pectoralis muscle, chest muscle. So angina, pain. Pectoris is chest pain. If you have seen angina pectoris patient, they keep a medicine always with them, that is called nitroglycerin. They put it under the tongue to make the artery wider. That dilates the artery, so more blood will flow here, so the pain will be gone. Okay, more oxygen will go there. However, if the artery that supplies to the muscle here uh, is completely blocked, so no blood will go here, so the tissue will die. Tissue death and necrosis of the tissue will occur, and that is called MI, commonly known as myocardial MI, which is myocardial infarction. So the tissue will die. And if large artery in the wall of the heart is completely blocked, that uh, patient may not survive. And myocardial infarction is very commonly used. The term is called heart attack. Heart attack. Common people use this term, MI or heart attack. Okay. Okay, so those are the things you need to know from this part of the cardiovascular system, CVS 1.